in frame, but wow, I have not updated this vlog at all. It is the first day I'm actually recording this vlog because I completely forgot that I had to do this video this month, truthfully. So I apologize, but so far for the Wheel of D20, I have read 2 books, working on my 3rd, and should today at least start and maybe finish my 4th one, depending on how fast I can get through it. It's been honestly a really crazy couple of weeks. It's been a whirlwind. I'm not going to get into any specifics, but today specifically, I am just now going on 3 o'clock being able to film because I had nail appointment today for the first time in a long time, and I got my nails done, and I had my hair done today, which I don't know if you'll be able to tell exactly. I'll have to see how it looks when I edit, but I did get my hair done today. I basically got the undercut all done. Again, I don't know if you can even see that. And then I did get my hair colored, basically just added some red to my hair because I've been missing having red in my hair for a while. And when I did it in July, it wasn't really good, so I lost a lot of it, and then I just got some of the layers reshaped, or at least just some of the layers done. I don't know, like, I'm just feeling like I'm going a million miles a second, but I do want to talk about what's been going on so far with the Wheel of D20 books. So like I said, I've got through 2, I'm working on the 3rd, and then have the 4th still to go for this month. Because I didn't watch my October TBR, although I technically was only supposed to have 3 spins for the month of October because of how well I did in September. I ended up getting a double spin, which basically was like I landed on the same prompt twice, which then forced me to add another spin onto the prompts. So I have to read 4 books this month, again, for this month. But if I complete all 4 of those before the end of the month, in this video basically, I then can go down in November to 2 prompts like I would normally be able to do. It basically keeps me from having to add on an extra prompt for November. I'm not even going to go into like what exactly would happen if I was to lose, because I don't really even know what I would do if I lost. And I'm sorry if I'm itching my eye a lot. My allergies have been like crazy the last handful of days because we're getting into fall time, and that means my allergies go out of whack. I don't know if anybody else has this, but my allergies run rampant when it is the transition between summer and fall, and then from winter to spring. It happens every year, and it's just really annoying. But let's talk about the books I've read so far. So the first one I did complete was Cinderella Is Dead by Kaylynn Bayron. This was the first of the 2 purple prompts I needed for the Wheel of D20, and this I really did enjoy. I give this a 4 out of 5 stars. This basically is the story of how the story of Cinderella that we know is alive and well, but she's been dead now for about 200 years, and this takes place in a world where it's the same world that Cinderella had lived in, except since her death, there's been this increase in this patriarchal society where basically the kings that have ruled over time since the first prince's death, the first Prince Charming's death, essentially the world has become more and more patriarchal, where at a certain point in time, young women are expected to go to these balls, these kind of like cotillions, if you will, and they are set up to where they will then be chosen by the men in the society to then become the brides of. And if they don't basically either go to these events, they don't do well at these events, and especially if they go to 3, I think it is, and they do not end up finding a husband in those 3 balls, they end up then being what is called forfeited, and nobody hears from these girls again. They are taken away. Nobody knows what happens to them, but they are basically presumed dead to some extent. And you learn that Cinderella's life was really kind of romanticized, and a lot of young girls have learned the story of Cinderella, but honestly, it's not all it seems to be. And our main character, whose name is Sophia, is, for one, a lesbian character. She is full-on, you know, just a lesbian. She's not bisexual or anything. And you learn that very quickly at the beginning of this book, because you learn that she has been trying to escape this town that she's lived in her whole life. She goes against everything that there is in this world, and she's trying to get her secret girlfriend to go with her, but this girlfriend does not really think this is a good idea and thinks it would be better for her to play the role that she is supposed to play in this world by getting a husband and doing things in that regard. And so Sophia is really kind of torn because she wants to leave so badly to save herself and keep herself from having to go through with this ball and everything that she doesn't even want to be a part of, that she doesn't believe is right. And her girlfriend is really kind of keeping her there. We also learn in the process of all of the story being developed that Sophia's family have really taken things to great lengths to protect her. They know about her sexuality. They know that she likes girls, but they have to keep up the image that that is not the case because they don't want her to be taken away. And it also could bring a lot of shame to the family and could then put the family in danger, because if one of the girls ends up showcasing that, you know, they are basically able to be forfeited, that puts the family that that girl is from in a lot of either economic peril or even situational peril, where they could then also be forfeited at the castle. And so it's better for Sophia to really play the part according to her parents and her girlfriend, as opposed to being who she truly is. There's a boy in town that is actually going through a very similar situation that Sophia is, and when they go to the ball together, they do decide that they're going to kind of have a marriage of convenience to protect each other and protect themselves. And then you find out that one of the men that is in this town, who is very much a bully, is looking to also take in Sophia. And instead of her basically adhering to the kingdom's wishes, she runs away from the ball, which then puts basically a bounty on her head. And you then see her meet up with this girl who nobody knows she exists, nobody knows that she's around, but you find out she is the direct descendant of one of the stepsisters of Cinderella, and through that we find a ton of information about the world that Sophia either didn't really know but kind of could have guessed, and or is things that like she just didn't know at all, and it's like brand new information to her. And you learn that the town itself is not as it seems to be, and the reason why it is the way it is because of generations after generations of patriarchal nonsense that has never been meant to actually happen, and it could have been avoided if some better choices had been made in the past. And so Sophia basically has to team up with this girl she meets and figure out a way to essentially save the kingdom and then save herself in the process of that. So there is some really very disturbing information in terms of misogyny, a little bit of racism, I think, here and there, and then also the pure fact that this is a patriarchal society. So there are talks and discussions about rape, domestic violence, things like that. So go into this with those kinds of things in mind, that this is very much a society where beating on women is pretty much not really questioned. It is something that is very much thought of as a good thing, because women in this world are given no real choice in the matter of anything that they do in this world. And so this is something that I do think that for people who are victims of domestic violence might find very triggering, because it is not just physical, but it is emotional, it is financial, it is, you know, everything under the sun of domestic violence involved in this story. Now, there aren't really too many things that you see on page. The most that you see on page is a argument that goes on between husband and wife, but there is murder, there is, you know, violence that happens in this novel that I would not think of lightly about. It is something that does need to be adhered to when in terms of content warnings, because it could be very triggering for a lot of people. Now, I will say I really liked this book a lot. I thought it was very fun. It was very fast to fly through, and I just really enjoyed it. I actually kind of had hoped that there would have been maybe a sequel to this of some kind, and I think that there definitely would have been room for it if that was the way that Kaylynn Bayron had decided to go with this, but it is a standalone. There is no, you know, thing about being a sequel at this point. But I would be curious to know, though, too, if there could be other things in the world of this story, like if there was to be a Snow White retelling or like a Beauty and the Beast retelling that could somehow infiltrate itself in the world of Cinderella Is Dead. I don't know if that's something that's possible, but I thought that would be a really cool idea. But I do think that one of the things that really hindered this, I really just feel like that the romance that there is between Sophia and another character in this book that we see develop over the course of the book was a little too quick in some capacity. I mean, the book was like almost 400 pages. And I also think that the way that the relationship kind of developed, while it was very sweet and very cute and very sapphic, it is something that I think happens a little too quickly, in the sense that Sophia, essentially in this new relationship, is still in the process of getting over her previous relationship with her girlfriend from the beginning of the book. And there's not really a true mourning period, I think, for that. It does feel very much like she finally cuts off ties with this one girlfriend and then just immediately hops into this new relationship. I would have preferred if there was a little bit more of a mourning period with that, especially because of the fact that this character fell very hard for the previous girlfriend, and there is talk about the fact that she really wishes that things were different and she mourns that aspect of it. But especially after she finally cuts ties for good with this girl, there's not really any clear mourning process of it actually being finally over and then having a good period of time between that and when she gets together with this other character. I just feel like that was a little rushed in my opinion, but that is also something that I think was probably due to the publisher's needs. That was something that probably got edited out because the publisher maybe thought it was unnecessary. It wasn't exactly why I knocked it down a full star, mind you. That was just one thing I really did not care for. The reason though I couldn't give it 5 stars was that it just didn't feel something that was like extra extravagant. It didn't feel like it was blowing my mind with, you know, anything new. It kind of just felt like a really cool retelling, and I really enjoyed it and would be looking forward to reading more of Kaylynn's work, but it didn't necessarily stand out from anything else that I had read so far, which was why I didn't give it that 5 star. Typically when I give 5 out of 5 stars to something, it's either because the content continues to be super good compared to previous installments or whatever, and or it is something that is outstanding, is something that's going to stick with me for a very long time based on the content, the characters, whatever, and also is something where the actual story stands out against everything else kind of thing. I do tend to rate quite a few things 5 stars, but I do think it's a lot more rare than it is for me to find things that are 4 and 3 stars and be like, yeah, I really liked this, but it didn't necessarily hit that bell for me that I'm looking for when it comes to a 5-star read, if that makes sense. So going on to book number 2, I ended up then reading The Sunbearer Trials by Aiden Thomas. Now this got a 5 out of 5 stars because this book was absolutely amazing. It hit literally every single box I was looking for, with this being an anticipated read of mine for the year of 2022. This is Aiden Thomas's newest book and is the first book in the Sunbearer Trials duology. This was actually the book that ended up being for the extra spin I had to do because I got 2 of the same prompt in the month of October. Now, the Sunbearer Trials dictates the story of a trans young man named Teo, who is basically a young adult, and in this world, it's very modern, but it has a lot of that Aztec Latin influence because the world itself has a lot of technology. It is a very futuristic kind of world, but there is so much to do with the idea of the gods being involved in this, specifically like the Aztec gods, the gods that you would probably know very well if you had studied any kind of Latin history, especially in like Southern America, going through like that kind of time. And this was amazing, but Teo basically gets involved in what's called the Sunbearer Trials. Every generation, or like every year or so, there is this competition against all of the demigods or the children of the gods to go through the Sunbearer Trials, where they basically will fight to see who becomes the Sunbearer, which is like a really prominent thing. It is like the highest title you could probably get in this world. And on the flip side of that, unfortunately, there is one person who will then be sacrificed for the greater good of the world, because a sacrifice basically keeps the bad things from happening in this world, and it usually ends up being where the person that ends up in first place becomes the Sunbearer, the person that ends up in last place is the sacrifice. Teo is the son of Quetzal, who is a bird goddess, I believe. Finds out that another demigod by the name of Gio, who is another trans character and is the son of the god of bad luck, basically. He takes it upon himself to kind of bring this kid under his wing and help him get through the trials the best he can and try to protect him, because he knows that with being the child of the god of bad luck, that does, for one, put a huge stigma on him and the fact that he's not worth anything, and he does get bullied a lot in this story, Gio does, and he also thinks that like by helping him, it could then, you know, maybe give Gio some kind of credibility in this world and make people see that he's not as bad of a kid as people want to make him out to be. I'm gonna say off the bat that this is a world where I don't believe, to my recollection, there's really any transphobia, because gender confirming things are a very big part of this culture. They actually talk about at one point where there is a gender confirming ceremony that happens kind of around the time of a quinceañera or something along those lines. And Teo talks about how at that quinceañera that he was supposed to have, he confirmed his gender as a male, and then they went through the process of putting him on T and all these things and having top surgery. But I do believe that he's still in the process of transitioning, if that makes sense. And then Gio has not, you learn, gone through any of that. But he does identify as male. And this is a pretty standard thing in this world. You know, if you change your gender, it's kind of a approachable thing. It is not something that is really looked down on, which is really interesting, and I think really is very cool, because I feel that this is something that could have easily been used as a targeting point for this book about the transphobic nature, but the fact that this is also from a culture that was very well established in religion history to be a culture that was not super particular about genders in the first place, that makes a lot of sense to me. Because if you know anything about the Aztec culture, they actually were one of several cultures that in the past used kind of more non-binary terms. They did believe that there were a lot of people who were considered kind of this two-soul-based idea where they weren't just inherently male or female, but a lot of times were a combination of the two. And so non-binaryism was a very big thing, and transness was a really big thing in that culture. And so I love the fact that Aiden really brought that into the story and made it a very apparent thing, because I do think that that is something that was going to be really important, especially with bringing in that influence. And Aiden also being himself a trans male and also having that Latin background was very, very fun to read about. There's like some words and phrases here and there that you learn that are from that culture, and it's just so fascinating to read. The thing I really loved about this, though, was the fact that there were a lot of twists and turns in this. The trials kind of have a feel that is similar to the Hunger Games, if you're fans of the Hunger Games, but it's not like everybody just dies left, right, and center like in the Hunger Games, right? It's more of an actual competition, with the end result, though, being the fact that somebody is going to then be a sacrifice. And there's a lot of conversation around that and about the problems that there could be within that kind of a competition, and the issues surrounding around the fact that there is no real decision in terms of who lives and who dies. The competition itself is in a way playing God. And while competitors are fighting to not only not be able to die and then also become Sunbearer, there's other things involved in it that are kind of like playing on an idea of a racism, if you will. The difference, though, being that it's not about specific races, it's about specific kinds of bloodlines, which again is in itself a kind of racism, because of the fact that if you delineate from one certain bloodline, you're seen as more valuable, more adept at things, a little probably more maybe richer socioeconomic wise, if we were to look at it that way. And then if you're part of other lines, you are kind of looked at as, you know, less than, like for instance, in this world, you have the Golds, who are basically the set of gods who were born first from the main god, Sol. And then you have the Obsidians, who are basically looked at as like the evil line of people. They are people who are not to be trusted. They are people that are looked at as very vile, evil creatures. And then you have the Jades, who are kind of like this idea where they're not good, they're not bad, but they're not like, they don't have the same opportunities as the Golds. Teo is a Jade himself, and one of his friends, we learn Naya is a Gold. And to see the dichotomy of their relationship, where Naya is not like a lot of other Golds and treats Teo with respect, but Teo still feels that there are some prejudices in Naya's mindset that are brought up because of the fact that she's a Gold. It's very interesting kind of conversation about how the bloodlines, while they're all from the same culture, have in themselves a kind of racism that is very apparent in any kind of culture, no matter how unified that culture may be. And it's just very interesting to see how this story really plays on a lot of those things. And again, the plot itself, twists and turns left, right, and center. The very end was like absolutely shocking. I did not expect anything to happen the way that it did. And I have yet to read Cemetery Boys by Aiden Thomas, which I have right here. And Cemetery Boys being his first book he released. But reading the Sunbearer trials honestly makes me want to read Cemetery Boys a lot sooner now, because I really like the writing style. I think he did a really good job talking about transness, really bringing it in as the main focal point of the story, but exploring it in the sense of like learning about how the culture views it, and then having some discussions about it with characters who might be questioning or having a hard time with transitioning, that kind of a thing. Now, the book I'm currently working on is The Weight of Blood by Tiffany D. Jackson. This is for the prompt for a book with a loved trope. This one in particular, the trope that I really love that is involved in this is the idea that you have basically a story that is being told kind of from like a perspective of looking back on an actual event that happened. If you don't know what The Weight of Blood is about, it is basically a modern retelling of the story of Carrie by Stephen King, if you're familiar with it. If you're not, Carrie was a story where Stephen King had written it, where there was a young girl named Carrie who basically had telekinesis and a type of maybe even pyrokinesis that developed over time, and she was bullied immensely in her school for being different. She came from essentially a really broken home with a religious zealot of a mother who taught her nothing about actually being a young woman. A very prominent scene from that is the fact that, that Carrie gets her first period, and her mother basically says that she is a whore because, you know, now she's going to end up becoming like a slut, in the sense that like men are going to come after her all the time, and she kind of hides her daughter away for the most part. Now, The Weight of Blood plays on a lot of that, like, do not get me wrong, and you learn in the story, similar to Carrie, that Maddie, the main character, similar to Carrie, is basically the perpetrator of a massive killing that happened in her town, where, like in Carrie, there is an accident that happens that ends up killing multiple students and teachers from their school, and it's something that people are still looking back on and trying to figure out what really happened. And so The Weight of Blood opens up where it's kind of a podcast, if you will, and they're looking at the story of the mystery about Maddie Washington. And we go back to find out that Maddie Washington is the daughter of a white man and a black woman, but her father is somebody who despises anything to do with being black. He is a very racist individual. He uses Maddie's white passing nature to his advantage by basically never allowing her to really grow up around black people. He absolutely disdains it. And this is also in like small town Georgia kind of thing we're talking. And many people in Maddie's school that she ends up going to bully her relentlessly. And they find out that Maddie has actually been passing as white for a very long time at the very beginning of this, and they find out she's black, which is a secret she's been trying to keep for many, many years. And when that happens, a lot of people continue to bully her even more, to the point where accidents are happening and things kind of get spread around on social media. You start seeing things happen to other characters that are really bad that they then blame Maddie for, when in reality it's their own fault for really getting into this kind of mess. And essentially there is a scene where there is a character who comes to school in a Halloween costume as blackface, and it's very triggering, and the element of social media as well and how that plays into a lot of the cancel culture we have in current society. Like, I kid you not, this is literally the most modern retelling of Carrie we will ever get in this generation, until more years have passed and more things have developed to where somebody else will then retell the story of Carrie, because every single aspect of this story is directly from the story of Carrie. And I know that a lot of people are going to say, oh, don't compare this to Carrie or anything, but it literally is the same story, just updated and having a more race-centered idea about it. It's literally a copy of Carrie through a different kind of lens and in a slightly different setup. Now, you do learn that Maddie actually does have abilities. She has telekinetic abilities and even pyrokinetic in some capacity. And over the course of time, you see characters that are trying to help her and trying to harm her. Some of the people trying to help her are this girl, Wendy, who is a white girl dating a black football star, football athlete who is like destined to do great things in football, go pro, all of those things. And she decides to allow her boyfriend Kenny to ask Maddie to prom as a way of kind of like showing that they care and they're sorry about all the things that have happened. And Kenny, also having his own perspective, starts to kind of see Maddie for who she really is. And he is one of the only people that actually gets really close to her for the first time and starts to see her for more than what people have kind of bullied her about being. And there's a lot of like inner turmoil in this, which I really appreciate. I actually like this so much more than the original. Genuinely, I love this so much more than the original story by Stephen King, because Stephen King's Carrie was very scratching the surface of things. We didn't really get to see too much of the actual character development of a lot of the people that were in the story, but this one is so much better. It's so good. We get to see things from so many different perspectives, and we get to see so many things involved in modern culture that plays into this story. Like, honestly, if you are looking to read this book, do not even touch Carrie. Don't touch it, because you don't get anything from reading Carrie and then reading this. Just read The Weight of Blood. Just read The Weight of Blood. That is all you need to do, because Carrie, honestly, it is like a 2 compared to the 20 that The Weight of Blood is. Like, I will constantly be talking about this with people and saying that this is so much better than the original because of the fact that it is. It plays so much more on things that I wish Carrie would have looked into, and it didn't. And I'm so proud that Tiffany decided to not only take on a piece that was very well beloved by a rabid fan base that Stephen King has, but also having the guts to then put in a whole race factor that nobody would have ever thought to do, or if they did think about it, never had the guts to do. Because y'all know for a fact that because Tiffany D. Jackson is a black woman taking on a white man's story, she is going to get a shit ton of flack for this, and I'm not going to stand for it. I am not going to stand for people attacking this woman because she decided to take a really boring ass story comparatively and making it into something better. I know I've given Carrie a 5 out of 5 stars in the past. I love Carrie. It is one of my most favorite Stephen King stories, but it is so much worse compared to this. It is so clear the differences between these novels that honestly, I'm never going to read Carrie again because I don't want to read Stephen King anymore, and I'm happy about that just by that fact itself. But the fact that I now have a story that's even better, that tells the same story even better, like Stephen King who? We're done with him. We're moving on to better stories that actually portray a more interesting aspect of that kind of a story. So, needless to say, I'm not even done with this book yet. I'm like probably closing in on 75% of it right now. This is going to be a 5 out of 5 stars. Because this has blown my expectations out of the freaking water. Now, I know that there's going to also be some people who are not going to enjoy the podcast idea of this, because I know that podcasts and stories for a lot of people is a little hit or miss. Totally get that. It's not a style that is for everybody. But I really like it because we are a culture now where crime podcasts, true crime podcasts, are a huge thing. And I love that Tiffany decided to do something with that with this, because I think that it is so different. Because if we do compare it to the original, in Carrie, it had a lot of newspaper articles, news reports, trial notes, things like that enveloped in the story itself. Like, that was the way that the story was told, along with the actual telling of the story itself. But the podcast element in this is so much more fluid and is so much more fun, especially with the audiobook. The audiobook is so good. It has like a full cast, or at least it has like multiple narrators as opposed to like 1 or 2. Y'all, I'm not kidding. Pick this freaking book up. Pick it up and love it, because, oh, I love it so much. I'm going to be singing this book's praises for the rest of the year, going forward even until maybe her next book comes out, because this is so much better than I was ever hoping, and I knew I was going to love it because I've loved Tiffany's work so many times. I just knew I was going to love this. But this has got to be her best work to date. And I am not going to shut up about it. And if I see people coming after Tiffany about making Carrie better, then y'all are going to be fighting me, because I am not going to stand for people slandering my girl Tiffany when she's done a way better job at telling the story than some old white man. So I said what I said. So, like I said, I'm not even done with this, but I will tell you, I'm going to give this a 5 out of 5 stars because it's freaking great. And it is really just exploring so many different things that I wish would have been brought up in Carrie, especially in terms of the fact that Carrie was very much a older story that relied on misogynistic ideas, and also had a lot of cattiness that I think was necessary for the time. But in today's world, cattiness between females is very different. And when you get social media involved, it is a whole new fucking ballgame. And I can't with this. I'm so happy. That's all I'm going to say for right now, because of the fact that I have not finished this as of yet. I'm going to come back to you guys once I get this done and then start going into my next book, which will be my final book for this vlog. I'm going to try.
excuse my crazy hair. It's been a day. I threw my hair up after going to get it done earlier today, but I wanted to update you guys because I did finish The Weight of Blood by Tiffany D. Jackson. Like I said, I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. Loved it. So fucking good. Please go read this. Like, for God's sake, this is so good. Just read it. I'm currently sitting on the ottoman to my rocking chair, so if I rock back and forth, that's why. But the next one I will be reading and finally finishing out this Wheel of D20 video with is A Lady's Guide to Etiquette and Murder by Diane Freeman. This is the first book in the Harley mysteries, and it basically is a set of cozy mysteries that are placed in like the late 19th century. And we're following a character who I guess is maybe solving the murder of her husband that was like a year before. And there's only like so many people that know about what happened. It includes our main character named Frances, a person that her husband was having an affair with, and also her new neighbor who essentially like I think is going to be our hero in a sense in this romantic story. But yeah, it's good so far. I mean, I'm only like 36 pages into it, but I like the writing. It's actually also going to be part of my Finish Your DNF series because this was a series recommended to me by my friend Jen at Genderqueer, and I am looking to try to read all 5 of the books in this series because they're very short, and I think that I'm going to enjoy them because I think they're just going to be so quick to read that I'm just going to fly through them and have no issues. But whether or not they're going to be something that I think are absolutely spectacular, I don't know. I have a love-hate relationship in some ways with historical fiction, especially that involves some kind of a romance. And I'm not really a huge fan of cozy mysteries either. So this is going to be something that's going to be a big challenge for me. But if I really like this, I may have to see if Jen has any other recommendations similar to this because of the fact that if I like this, maybe there's other books out there that are similar to this that I could gel well with. But for the Wheel of D20, this is completing the second purple prompt that I had for the wheel. So I think we're going to continue with this. I'm going to try to read more of it tonight. It's very late in the day, though. I've been finally getting done with recording and stuff for the day, and I'm so freaking tired. I do have the audiobook for this, though, as well, so I can listen to that. And I'm going to be out for the day tomorrow to go visit my sister with my parents. So, yeah. But that's going to be it for me for right now. I think that I'm going to basically film... Woo! Almost fell. Uh-oh. Basically film the opening clip, though, for that Finish Your DNF video right before I go back downstairs and finally like wind down for the evening. And I will come back to you guys once I've officially finished this, and it should be, if not tomorrow, then probably sometime during the day on Monday. And hey guys, so it is now Sunday. It is about 11:48 in the morning. I'm gonna get picked up here by my mom real soon to go visit my sister with her, but I wanted to update you guys real quick on Lady's Guide to Etiquette and Murder, which is currently in the living room. I'm over 100 pages into the first book still, and really am liking it. There's a little bit more complexity to the plot than I had originally thought. So in the first book, not only are we seeing that Frances, our main character, is possibly being put up for the murder of her husband the year prior, which we find out he was having an affair, and she kind of didn't necessarily cover up the murder, but they definitely made it seem like he hadn't had illicit affairs, essentially by moving his body from his lover's room to his bedroom with the help of a friend who is the brother of Frances's best friend, that's named George. She also, the year after he passes, decides to move to a new place, and in the course of that year, we find out that her brother-in-law and her husband's family have basically been trying to get money out of her, and they basically find out that Reggie, her husband, had married her for her money, essentially, because she comes from a very wealthy American family, and so there's a lot of issues surrounding around that. They're basically saying that all the money she has is her husband's family's money, not hers, and there's some things going on with that. We also find out that in conjunction with the fact that Frances is being looked at for possibly murder, she is being looked at as possibly a thief in some capacity, or there is some thieving going on in town. People are losing some pretty valuable things
things, especially some people who have a lot of money, and they're not sure whether or not the thievery that is happening is also part of what's been going on with the murder and stuff like that. So not really clear as to like where everything's going to tie in, but there's definitely a lot of complexity in this story, which I greatly appreciate. And it's interesting because I had thought going into this that Frances was going to be more of the detective, the sleuth in all of this, and I do think it's a story where she's going to start being able to piece things together herself, and, you know, she's going to talk to some of the policemen, but it's going to be more of her developing the story as she goes, and being the case for the rest of the books, where she kind of like figures out what's going on in a lot of these other cases that are going on. But it doesn't start off that way, and I was really kind of surprised, but also not at the same time because of the fact that this is placed in like the late 19th century. So obviously women were not really looked at for being in the police force or investigating or anything like that. But it definitely does feel like Frances is going to end up being that character where she's going to start figuring things out on her own, and it's going to lead to some very interesting developments, especially with the first book being about specifically her husband and what really happened to him, because all she knew going into it was that the lover came to her saying that he had passed away after they had relations in her bed, and that was it. And so then she, to protect not only his image, but then her image as well, had her, the lover, and the friend George end up basically moving the body. And like I said, we find out later that George is her neighbor when she moves into a new place, and so she's obviously telling him about everything that's going on with the development of the case and the fact that they're looking at it for murder. And I think, like I said, George is going to end up becoming that kind of hero where he's going to be like the romantic interest. And I don't know why Oscar's barking. Oh, that's my mom. I gotta get going, so I will see all of you guys later. Okay, I have no idea how far I need to be able to be in frame for this, but we're gonna go with this. I'm currently working on dinner. I'm making chicken noodle soup for my husband because he's been a little sick the last few days. And I think I'm about ready to put noodles in here in just a minute, but I wanted to come on and talk to you guys about the fact that I did finish A Lady's Guide to Etiquette and Murder. I don't know exactly if you can even see this right now, but I'll put the picture up for it because I have the book physically, but it's in the office, and I don't really want to bring it out here when I have a mess in this kitchen. Okay, so Lady's Guide to Etiquette and Murder. This was for my final prompt for the Wheel of D20, and I did finish it, so the Wheel of D20 for October is now complete. And it's also the most challenging one we've had so far going through because of the fact that we had two of the same prompt in this month, which was Purple prompt. Gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. Really enjoyed it, and I'm going to talk more about it in my Finisher DNF series because of the fact that this is also for my Finisher DNF series for the month of October. But really like this so far. Basically, the whole of the story gets pretty wrapped up, the main case, the main like mystery, but there's an element of it that I do think could play into more going down the line because there's 5 books in this series, and there's one aspect that doesn't necessarily get fully resolved, but I do think will continue on over time because it's kind of cool. It's not like super thrilling by any means. This is definitely kind of like more of a cozy mystery, and the main character is more so kind of like just trying to solve the case, even though she probably shouldn't do this on her own. And there is a bit of a romantic subplot that plays through with one of the other characters that I did enjoy. I think it was really cute. It just didn't necessarily hit that 5-star mark for me, but I am very interested in continuing on with the series, so I'm very happy that this was the case. That basically ends the Wheel of D20 video for October. Very happy to be able to get these done in the month. I was struggling so hard at the beginning of this month, but 10 days into the month, finally finished this TBR and also have made some good progress on my Finisher DNF series. I will be working on some of those other books later this month, but I do have to still play some catch up because I'm a little behind on my TBR. I should mention though here before I end the video that basically with the fact that I completed 4 prompts this month as opposed to the normal 3, with the fact that we added on an extra spin and it was more of a challenge, going into November I will only have to do the normal 2 spins that I would have had to do if I had only needed to do 3 reads for the month of October, if that makes sense. Anyway, thank you guys so much for joining me in this video. If you guys did enjoy it, please do give it a big thumbs up. And if you haven't already and you'd like to be and would like to see more content like this, go ahead and hit that button down below and subscribe to become an owlet in our flock. And I will see all of you guys in the next video. Bye guys!